CBS News Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett joins me now. So, Major, the future of National Security Advisor Mike Flynn seems murky right now. What are you hearing?
I wouldn't describe it as murky, Elaine. I would describe it as tenuous, hanging by a thread, almost out the door. I mean, those are the kinds of phrases that are being bandied about here at the White House. Now, there is always in politics a possibility, if not a probability, of someone on the way out holding on to a position they'd like to hold on to, making some kind of amends or making some sort of new promise to perform better or do things differently that preserves their particular position. But all indications are that the National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, has antagonized key Trump White House officials to the degree that, given numerous opportunities today and over the weekend to offer his own vote of confidence for his National Security Advisor, President Trump has declined to do so. And the brief moment this afternoon when Kellyanne Conway, a counselor of the president, said General Flynn had the full confidence of the president, within less than an hour, the White House completely undercut Conway's statement, obliterating it and questioning her own credibility by saying the president was evaluating Flynn's future. This is after Flynn spent the entire weekend with President Trump at the Winter White House in Mar-a-Lago and had several phone conversations with Vice President Mike Pence. I'm led to believe he attempted to apologize in those conversations, but those attempts did not satisfy Pence. And importantly, they did not satisfy the White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Those are some of the White House officials very skeptical about the necessity and the usefulness of keeping Flynn in this White House and on this team. For the moment, he is still on the team and still in the White House. But his future appears not murky, Elaine, but very tenuous indeed.
Meantime, Major, there are reports that things are extremely tense among members of the National Security Council itself. What do you make of that?
Well, the Security Council is not fully staffed, and that's one problem. There just aren't enough people inside the White House assigned to the National Security Council with enough deputies to carry out the workflow, provide the memos, and handle what's known as the interagency process. One of the chief obligations, if not the most important obligation of the National Security Advisor and everyone who works on the National Security Council staff, is to be the White House interagency general, if you will, the one in charge of keeping in touch with the State Department, the CIA, the Pentagon, and other aspects of the American foreign policy network, and work all of their issues simultaneously. Well, if you don't have enough people to do that, things break down. And Flynn's own leadership of the few people he does have rubbed some people in the White House the wrong way. Communication hasn't always been good, and allegiances have been strained. These are kind of workmanlike issues that typically don't get discussed in a time like this, because usually a team that comes in from an election has a general sense of how to, A, staff a National Security Council, and B, make it function, if not at top speed, at something approximating top speed. But this goes back, Elaine, to a problem that existed from the transition efforts during the campaign and the transition efforts after President Trump won the election. They were not as thorough and they were not as widespread as they could have been. The transition efforts in the latter stage of the campaign were essentially halted at Mr. Trump's direction, and then they were put together and refocused very rapidly and somewhat unexpectedly after his Election Day victory. The transition itself was rough, and some of the consequences of that understaffed and rough transition, carried out by a lot of people who did not have nearly as much experience as administrations coming in of the past, well, some of those problems are now visiting themselves in real time to this White House.
So, Major, against the backdrop of that rough transition, I want to get your take on something else. Reports that members of the Intelligence Committee are reportedly withholding information, or Intelligence Community, I should say, are reportedly holding information from the president. Have you heard anything on that front?
I have not. I don't have any original reporting on that at all. One small element of that potential story is that on Friday, the CIA, which is led by an appointee of the president, Mike Pompeo, he's the CIA director, nominated by the president, confirmed by the United States Senate. That CIA denied a top deputy of National Security Advisor Mike Flynn top secret security clearance for a position, essentially rendering that person ineffective and incapable of carrying out the job that Mike Flynn wanted them to. Now, that doesn't fall necessarily into the category or under the umbrella of the intelligence community withholding information from the president. I have nothing that verifies that or substantiates that. You've talked about reports that indicate as much. I don't know. What I do know is someone within this White House who Mike Flynn had tapped to be a top advisor and figurehead within the National Security Council was denied a top secret security clearance by the CIA. That's more, Elaine, than a simple intramural disagreement. That is a rank signal that your person doesn't have what it takes to receive a top secret security clearance. They're essentially useless to you and to the federal government, and that is something that can only be interpreted by someone like General Flynn as a direct slap, and if not only a direct slap, a humiliation of their own attempt to build their team within the White House.
All right, Major Garrett at the White House for us. Major, thank you.
Sure.